with that. It is important that all the churches comply with this policy. And I also can assist in some reviews to confirm that the parishes are maintaining some safe ministry environments. So for instance, if in your parish you want to review where your Sunday school meets or how your offices are arranged and set up, I can help you with some of the standards around that. So that's sort of my update. I hope that that's feels supportive for you. If you're unclear about your role as warden in relationship to my work or to this policy, I hope you'll feel really welcome to contact me anytime. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Jane. We'll, of course, all be available for questions at the end of the session. So let's move on. I'm going to cover a couple of areas in the next little piece. So the first one is just talking a bit about insurance. Of course, I always like to start with, but why? And while in some senses that's an obvious answer, but it really is about balancing the assets and the worth that we carry in the, at least from a temporal perspective, and the liabilities that are created by the things that go on, by people and by situations. And it is about trying to manage risk. And so that is very much protecting our assets, because in today's world, many things that can hit us that can either be damage or harm or a loss that comes with it. And so, and we do live in a litigious world, and that is something that certainly as we continue to discuss with insurance companies, that becomes more and more part of where their real focus is. We continue to be insured with ecclesiastical. Ecclesiastical is basically a born for purpose company. It started in the Church of England, and their focus in the market is around places of worship and other public. They also involve with things like some education institutions. And if you look at most of the things you would go and visit in the UK, like Westminster Abbey or St. Paul's and such, they would be insured by ecclesiastical. Continued to be partly owned by the Church of England, and through all the pieces, through all the changes in the last several decades, half century, ecclesiastical has continued to be a viable option. We switched this year, and I'll talk a bit more about it in a minute, but we used to use, at one time, we've used Northbridge for some of our liability. We've used Lloyd's of London. This year, after a whole lot of negotiating and detailing, we came back and we are now with a company called SUM, which is Strategic Underwriting Managers. We did last year change our broker from Aon to Hub, and we are serviced out of the Ottawa office of Hub. In the province of Ontario, we've kind of narrowed down. 3 dioceses, including us, are handled by Hub. 2 are handled by Aon, and 2 are handled by Gallagher, which is an independent set of offices. So the documents and packaging have gone out. Yes, I am very aware that we are much later this year than our where we usually want to be. This year has been an interesting set of challenges. As you know, we did change broker, and while that's a change that in discussions and such, it really did change how some of the billing and tooling and getting them to do things in the structure that we use, and getting all that work through was a much more time-consuming process than we had we had even planned or hoped. And that included having to have some of their tooling changed and having to change some of the tooling we use to be able to produce the invoices. Ecclesiastical, previously, the broker would have produced the packages. So historically, you would have had your packages on Aon paper, so to speak. But Hub does not have that option. Ecclesiastical now requires that they produce it, which of course takes longer because they handle almost all the dioceses across the country. They put a new system in place. They had a whole lot of people changes, including on the underwriting side. And so all of that just caused a sequential set of things. And it's another one of those, if you knew the problems we had, you get right at, but this tended to be, was one thing following the next. And so sequentially, it took a little more time than we had hoped. The other thing is that we are driving to manage, optimize the amount of coverage based upon the cost. And that really does require a fair bit of time and effort. Part of that, we made the change with some of the liability pieces. We are looking at making future moves as we go, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the real intent there is to try and strike a balance where the insurance, which is essential, can be done at a cost that is affordable. So basically, what the core of the property piece, ecclesiastical basically applied a 3% increase to all replacement costs. And so unless you've had some type of reassessment done, the replacement cost went up 3% year over year. So if it was $100,000 in 24, it's 103,000. And of course, premiums are calculated by taking the replacement cost and multiplying it by the premium rate. So for 2025, Ecclesiastical did not change the rate. They just applied the inflation to the replacement cost. So if everything else remained equal, basically the premium on property, which is the bulk of it, would have gone up 3%. There are exceptions. Some people had some reappraisals done. Some had ecclesiastical move them for them. At the same time, we have in the diocese our deductible reduction program. Try saying that 3 or 4 times quickly in a row. But that program provides basically for the churches to be refunded 80% of the deductible on a claim when a claim is made, paid for, which they receive back. We do that from a central fund on our balance sheet. This practice has been around many years, several decades. You don't see it, of course, unless you make a claim. But if your claim was a $2,500 deductible, the insurance company would pay back and hold back the $2,500, and then the diocese would refund $2,000 to the parish of the $2,500 deductible. On the other group of things which have $25,000 deductibles, it would be $5,000 and $20,000 refunded. So that fund, we each year look at what we've consumed in the year and then what we think we will need the next year, and then what we call top it up. And that gets distributed amongst the churches on the invoices. So what happened is that we felt, after having looked at the numbers for the end of last year, that we will make through 2025 without a top up. And so that amount, there was no charge for on your invoices. The net effect of that is that particularly for the churches that have lower premiums, that actually some churches, a good number, saw a very slight decrease in their total insurance bill 24 to 25. And as you can see below, the average bill, and average just being across all of our churches, the average invoice was $7,360. The median, which is 50% are above, 50% are below, the median was 4,588. So obviously some of the more expensive properties, the higher value properties push the average up, but the median sits around 4,600 bucks. The average, again, at the macro level, went down 3%, was the average change, again, because the deductible top up wasn't charged. And the median was 2%. Several churches had 1-2% increases. Some others had 1-3% decreases. But for the most part, we have more or less remained flat year over year. The other thing we've talked about before, and I'll just do a quick update, at the provincial level, we all have the same challenges. So the 7 dioceses, we formed a task force to work on this. And that, in the short term, has been focused on containing increases and learning from each other to help drive value. And then longer term, we're looking for alternate approaches. And so in doing that, we have a whole lot of conversation. And the good news is across the diocese, we have some people with some expertise. And we also do things like meeting with ecclesiastical's executive. So legally, you can't meet with your insurer without a broker in the room unless it's just a listening session. So our meeting with ecclesiastical is for them to hear us. And we are quite clear about the challenges, not just in terms of things like we can't afford the insurance, but also areas like churches that, we know the situation is one where we need an alternative way to be able to package what the loss would look like. Some cases that's demolition value. Some cases that's what we like to call replacement value. We're trying to work with ecclesiastical to create alternatives that will better reflect the value that we require from our insurance. And so that work is going on. We also have hired an independent consultant. And the idea is that they're not trying to sell us anything. They're simply providing industry expertise. They're looking at each diocese's package. And in the next week or so, we will see that feedback at the individual diocesan level. And then also then looking across the province to look at what the alternatives are. And there are things we can do, not only just things like changing companies, but again, we have to be cautious because not all insurance companies want to take on the unique sets of risks and assets that we have. Some of our churches don't have water. Like, forget about a sprinkler system. And I don't believe any of our buildings have sprinkler systems. Forget about alarm systems, just having water. Some of the churches are made of, were built 100 and some years ago, and they're wood construction. They catch fire, you've got an issue. They're in a remoter area where a volunteer fire department, and it may take some time to get there. There's the age of our buildings, the condition of our buildings, the value that's somewhat unique in them. A pipe organ, which is what it costs to replace one, can be quite significant. The carvings and unique woodwork, the many things in there, not just that carry emotional value, but significant financial. So we look at all of that and look at what our alternatives may be. We are talking about things like, do we raise our deductibles? And while that would have more of an impact when there's a claim, it would reduce the load in general. So there's, the matters as they work upon them with all of the arithmetic that helps solve all that. So the consultant is working through that, and we continue to try and look at ways that as a province and individual dioceses, we can seek improvement. For 26, we've started to work with Hub, updating our properties, updating, as the listings and the values, there's always changes. Ecclesiastical underwriting is now working through what they believe they're going to look at for increases. I do not yet have guidance to be able to say to you, the guidance is that there'll be a 3% increase in replacement cost and a 2% increase in fees the premium rates. Don't have that yet. But once we do, I will pass that along. We are going to again meet with Ecclesiastical at their executive team. And that's actually Remembrance Day, and that'll be in their Toronto headquarters. Last year, they did listen to us. I think some of the things we saw post that helped demonstrate that they did listen, and we are working through with them in terms of how they can better serve us. We will work through the consultant. I will meet with them, go through the package and then the overall piece, and then look at how we can adjust going forward. So and this is across all 7 dioceses. So that's really where the insurance work is at, trying to contain things for the next year, and then look in the longer term at ways where we can more cost effectively try and manage. But just for clarity, it is clear that insurance and the increases in insurance become major factors for parishes going forward. One thing I will add here, and this ties to the next topic, bridges to the topic of cemeteries. And we have an increased number of cases where there is either no church or the church has been deconsecrated and isn't used anymore, but they are now standardizing that we can't just tuck them under somewhere else. And so we're going to see cases where there is a cemetery and no church where the coverage is bridged in. That is going to affect, because all cemeteries must have insurance. They need it from a liability perspective. If someone was to slip and fall, someone was to break an ankle, all of those types of things, someone was to, come on your cemetery, even though they may not be there legally, you are still responsible for them in many ways. So there's a number of areas like that, as well as some of the fraud areas and bank accounts and all of that. So that is an area that I believe next year we're going to need to do some more sorting through, because the costs will go up. We've been sort of tucking cemeteries underneath. Speaking of cemeteries, again, we see cemeteries. There are an increasing number that are really struggling, and a great deal of that is because a great number of our cemeteries are obviously historic, and some of them go back 150, some cases almost 200 years, and many of them saw most of their activity well before there were any requirements for what used to be called perpetual care and what is now called care maintenance. But so there's limited funds that are put away on that front. At the same time, they're not seeing many sales of internment rights. So for many years, cemeteries were working because they still had lots of people buying, in the old days, buying plots. Now you buy internment rights. Without money coming in, either from the investments in care and maintenance funds or from new business, the costs have escalated. And now where it used to be where someone from the parish or someone in the community would say cut the grass for the price of gasoline, now even small cemeteries look at north of $5,000 a year to cut the grass. And if you only have $1,000 of income coming in, that becomes problematic. That ends up being a load on the church. And we've got several churches have now put their hand up and says, we can't do this. As well, there's been the increased work with the BAO around regulatory, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. That is going to get tighter, not easier. And of course, declining number of volunteers that are available to do some of the work, whether that's managing it, keeping the records, physical maintenance, all of those types of things. So we are across the province working with the BAO. We have a working group on cemeteries and the Bereavement Authority. I actually chair that group. And we are working directly with the provincial government because of some of the things that are starting to happen. In the past, the BAO provided flexibility for some small community-driven and small church cemeteries. And that flexibility we are seeing is simply going away. A good example of that, several dioceses, including us, I'll speak more about care and maintenance in a minute, had a pooled care and maintenance fund, which the FBCSA, the Funeral, Burial, Cremation Services Act, requires that they be held by a trust company, ours are, but that each cemetery has its own account with the trust company, which is not the case in our diocese. So they're currently working through a detailed inspection and audit of our funds, which will then lead to us having to take those funds out of that central fund. There's about $1.5 million that sit in there and move it out. And cemeteries will either need to go to individual trust companies, which is typically an expensive proposition to get set up and not practical unless you've got probably north of 100K, or going to the public trustee. And that is probably an option that we're going to need to pursue for good numbers of our cemeteries. We had at the start of the year about 45 cemeteries that had funds in there. The BAO is now requiring compliance. And so as they do that, we're going to need to shift those funds out, work with each cemetery board to shift those funds. And that's because they're trust funds, it's not here, we'll just write you a check. You have to get permission. There's a whole process that needs to be followed. It is part of their focus on compliance. And they're very clear that the public good is just another word for compliance. And they are one of the things that we are currently engaged with politically is that they're looking to make a change through some regulations that's going to go through the legislature under the Cutting the Red Tape banner as an express track for omnibus bills to go through. Some of the things that are tucked in there in this case, they can now, so if a cemetery, if you don't file your ALRs, you'll continue to get serious letters from however, they, at the end of the day, they can pursue it in a number of ways. They don't have the ability to levy fines. When this legislation passes, if it goes through as it is, they'll be able to assess penalties up to $25,000 for failing to comply. And they also indicate that many times they hear, well, we didn't know that, or we didn't mean to do it against the act. That's the way we've always done it. For example, trust funds. Their point is that intention is not a factor. Compliance is. So again, ignorance of the law is not a defense. And so they are really looking to tighten down. We've taken this now, we're working with individual MPPs and with the Premier's office to try and get that legislation shifted and some more flexibility put in place to recognize that small cemeteries, community cemeteries, church cemeteries are different. So what I can also advise is that we've got that work going on. We've transferred, when a cemetery gets to the point of saying we can't do this, there is what's called the abandonment process, and it requires municipalities to assume cemeteries. And we've transferred a couple this year already, recent months. There's 10 other ones right now that are in the process of being transferred. And there's a number of other cemeteries that are just, giving us the feedback. We don't see we're going to be able to continue to do this longer term. But what's important to note for the wardens is that until it's assumed by the municipality, the responsibility for the cemetery remains with the church that holds the operator's license. And typically that's the cemetery board. But if the board isn't functioning, the wardens become responsible. As all other things, as Jane pointed out, that the temporal matters, the wardens as the corporation become responsible even if the cemetery board has resigned or stepped away. So it's important to note that. And again, if your cemetery board is now questioning their ability to go forward, then please let's engage on that and discuss what the alternatives and path forward may look like. We have a good number of cemeteries that have been with churches that closed a number of years ago. And there's still people with an emotional piece obviously attached to the cemetery. But it's now becoming a matter that I don't think we're going to be able to sustain going forward. So going from cemeteries, just a quick set of notes on CMM. We are beginning the communications. To be honest, the insurance work kind of set that back as well in terms of running out the invoices and packaging. That work is ready to start going out. If you have not provided either a completed green sheet or a copy of financials and a request that we complete the green sheet, we will now, when we do this next piece, what we're going to do is go to the CRA's website where the information from your T3010, and if you have a charity number and it's still active, you have the T3010. So for 2025, we will go look up what your 2023 total income was, and we'll take and assess that to define that as your assessable income, and then 20% of that becomes CMM. There are a few churches that haven't put them in yet. That means that nothing, when you do it that way, nothing is non-assessable. And we know that capital projects and donations that go into investments and pass-through funds, those things are non-assessable, but you need to file your green sheet or provide your financials in order to access that deductibility. So that'll come shortly. And then We are then starting the review of those that have sent in their 2024 financials for 2026 calculation. And again, trying to work through, there always is questions around what is accessible and not. So we're going to try and do a workshop around that. And finally, is when we did some work with a JOT form. We had issues with JOT form, and then as we tested it with some people, not so much for accuracy, but for usability, started to realize there was some other issues that we hadn't addressed. Right now, as part of a pilot, we are working on some artificial intelligence stuff. And one of the things that is very big in the world now is creating what are called artificial intelligent agents. And it's, if anybody remembers Windows back in, I think it was Windows 98 or when that had the little paperclip. It was the little guy that popped up on your Windows desktop screen, and you could ask it questions. How do I change the font? How do I save this? How do I? Well, that's like a very, very, very simple version. But the AI allows an agent so that now it'll be a much more interactive and customized piece. We actually think we'll be able to provide and hopefully prototype something in the next few months that will actually take a generational jump with this and make this significantly easier, including being able to talk to it rather than filling out a form. How it'll ask how much was your income from collection plates, and then you can ask, well, does that include envelopes? No, it doesn't. It's just what you take in loose on a plate. Oh, okay, that would be fine. That kind of interaction is what we're trying to get to. Last thing from me, we have been working and we've got some bandwidth now to be able to do work around the IT space. One of the things we've long been trying to do is move from Canadian Web Hostings. And Canadian Web Hostings, for many years, hosted our website. And Mark moved us off of that a number of years ago, and a lot of parishes are using the same provider now. We're going to move off Canadian Web Hostings for email, and we're going to move to the gold standard. And the gold standard is Microsoft Exchange. And what makes it the gold standard, apart from the scale of Microsoft and their dominance of corporate email, but also the things like security that are growingly concerns for us. It'll integrate better into our other systems and provide greater reliability. We get more and more, the scam attempts are getting better all the time. I'm sure many of you have had an email that purports to be from the bishop or from the executive officer, archdeacon, from my office, and says, do you have a moment? I need some help. Can you help me? By the way, I'm in a meeting right now and you can't call me, but can we do this by email? And then they'll end up telling you what they really need is could you get $10,000 of Amazon cards or Apple cards and then scratch the number off the back and just email it to me? No. But what they're trying to do is throw out many hooks, many pieces of bait and lure in the water and hope that they get people to bite. And in the good old days, it was someone in some African country that was a prince that wanted to hide their $50 billion. And if you would just help them. And so what we're looking to do is move off of that, because inside the security system, it'll validate, if the email is from the bishop, purports to be, it'll confirm, yeah, it is from the bishop. The Microsoft piece will give us much more secure environment. And with that, we're going to move the first phase, which is we're just finishing the planning now. And in the next couple of weeks, we will move anyone who's currently got an ontario.anglican.ca account will be moved, and you'll get communication. Nishta is working all of that, and you'll get moved. There'll be a migration over, and you'll get instructions that says, as of this date, you're going to need to go in and do the following. Basically, it's Outlook and set it up. And it's an auto configure, so it doesn't require a whole lot of, well, what port number and what's it will do all that for you. It will move your email as part of that's in your inbox as part of that process. So the first step is our existing users. The next step will be to standardize that, and our method from the diocese to all of our active clergy would be to communicate using the ontario.anglican.ca accounts. So we know we've got a whole lot of folks using a whole range of things. Once we get everybody ported over, we'll be sticking to the Ontario Anglican, and that provides the security and the pieces that are needed. The third phase will extend that out to churches and parishes. So our intention then is that each church will have an email account. In fact, maybe one for the wardens and one in general. But what that'll let us do is also set up the rest of a Microsoft account for each church. And that will give you access to the full Office suite. And so that'll get Outlook, which is the email client, but Word, PowerPoint, Excel, the Teams client, the security package. It will also give OneDrive, which of course is Microsoft's storage space at the individual account level, and SharePoint. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But that will, at that point, we will give each church an online account. At this point, we have a bundle of what are called cloud accounts, which will be free. So the clergy, for example, as we roll them, they'll get a cloud account. That gives you cloud access to all of the Office pieces. If you want to download things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and run them on your own PC, on your iPhone, your Android, whatever, that costs a few bucks a month. It's quite reasonable. I think it's about $350, and we'll provide that as an option as well. So it's significantly cheaper for churches to have all of this type of capability, for the clergy to have it. It'll be significantly cheaper, and of course, it'll all be within a secured domain. That will also allow us to take the next sets of steps. So things like monthly invoices and monthly statements and investment documents, etc. Rather than emailing those out, and you get the question of, well, the wardens changed and we can't get at. This will now have a OneDrive for each church, just like think of it as a folder sitting in a secured space unique for that church that will let us put stuff in it. And so your monthly statements will go in there, and therefore there's a permanent spot for them. So when you're sitting going, well, what did that look like last month? What did it look like 2 years ago? All of that will be there in a OneDrive place, secure, and the access will be controlled obviously by the wardens. We also plan to integrate with Sage Payroll. Today, for those that are on payroll, you get a email with a PDF that has your secured pay stub or your payroll summary for T4s and things like that. This will then, you'll be able to log into a portal inside our Sage system and be able to access all of those, including the ones going back, not just the current one. And you'll also be able to do simple things like changing addresses and that kind of stuff. So that portal piece will integrate with all that, and that'll provide that. The final step we plan on a little bit farther out is setting up an intranet within the diocese. And for those that have been worked in a company, there's the internet and then there's the intranet. And the intranet is what you use for communicating to your own people. You know, when I was in Nortel, that's where you would get information from. That's where you would get, you know, when you needed a form, when you wanted to know where do I go for this, that was all available on the intranet. It's secured, it stays within. So again, the hackers aren't the people outside that are scraping our website for information. You won't have to go to the website for it. It'll be sitting on the intranet, which you'll easily access through the environment. So all of that is kind of the path that we're on right now. It begins with the email change, and then we'll carry through the next few stages. Lots there, I understand, and we'll be doing some training and obviously videos and such. And Nishta will be working through to provide support to folks for anybody that either needs help or gets into issues. And so our next meeting is going on the third Thursday of the last month of each quarter. We fall into the octave of Christmas pre, I guess, but we'll go with the 18th, and you can put that one in your calendars. And with that, we will open for questions. The bishop is online, alive and well, and Jane is online, and Wayne is also online, so we can take questions. You can either put your hand up, and I see folks now. The nice thing is it cues it for us and tells us who was first, or you can go into the chat and ask a question. Laura Conway is online, and Laura will act as the moderator on the chat session. And so let me put people there. So number one up, Wayne Thornhill.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Alex, just going back to the cemetery thing, you know, we're going through a lot of stuff in that regard. And for example, at the Christ Church, where demolition is imminent, there is no warden per se. It's only been people from St. James and even one or two from Prescott over the years that have helped keep the cemetery going, because the church has been empty for over 30 years. So at some point, theoretically, what happens? If the cemetery board resigns, okay, and there is no warden or wardens set up for that particular church, because it is not part of St. James. St. James is totally separate. We have maintained the same members of the cemetery board for both, but they're separate. You know what I mean? So what happens in that case? Does it just fall back to the diocese?
Well, ultimately, it would fall back to the diocese. I can tell you, we've been through one recently. The bereavement authority will pursue the last people on record. So they will say, well, Wayne Thornhill, you were listed as a member of the board, as an officer. You have an accountability. You may have resigned, but you need to then tell us, so they don't let you off the hook. The intention for us is for all of these transitions to be smooth. I mean, obviously, what we want to do is respect what that cemetery and the church have been and continue to be. We want the records. I mean, the big thing the municipality wants is the records, that they know who's buried where, if there's outstanding interment rights. And then obviously they want any funds that are outstanding. So we take care of that. It's just when there's a complete void, and if it ends up being the diocese, we're kind of left to we're just left to try and basically shift it as fast as we can. What I can tell you is different municipalities are different to work with. Some of them are outstanding and very collaborative and cooperative. Some of them will resist it like you're trying to hand them the plague. So it varies, but the preferred mode is that the final cemetery board, works with, and we get it done smoothly.
Yeah. Okay. I know I've been speaking with the demolition contractor, and they have submitted the application for demolition permit, but they haven't received word yet. And she said she's not sure why, other than the fact that they said they had to review it. So
not sure. We can talk about that one. We can talk about that situation separately. But that one we can.
Yeah. Well, I told her if she needed me to contact the township, I could do that just to see what's going on, So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. George Vale, you're next on the list.
Hi, everyone. My question for you, Alex, is in the insurance. You gave the average invoice, the price, and the median invoice, the price. But if you, I guess what I was kind of asking is what brings forth these different prices? Like now, what about the people that are higher than that? What constitutes a difference in price between the average and what I call high?
So the short, so again, just for clarity, every church, the liability bill, the liability premiums are the same for every single church in the diocese, whether you're the smallest church or the biggest. The liability costs, just under $2,000, are the same. What causes the difference in bills is the replacement cost. So if the replacement cost of your building is $25 million, that generates a much higher bill than someone where the replacement cost is, say, 200,000. And again, and I know the situation at St. John's well, where it is the replacement cost that that affects it. And that's why St. John's is, because you have such a big building, and because it's been appraised at a value. That's the issue. That's one of the challenges we're trying to sort, to create a different method than pure replacement cost. And that's because that's where the delta is purely in the cost of replacing the building and contents.
Okay, but what that at one time my understanding is that if something would have happened to that church, and God forbid that ever does, but if it did, they would want it replaced exactly as it is now. But then correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they've changed that. If something was to happen that church was completely destroyed, although it's the most beautiful church I know of, but I think we would probably you would build something a lot more efficient, not of that size, and you could probably replace with a new building for less than what this one is valued at.
And that's what we call reflecting, not what was built in the 1800s, but what you would do now. and it would be a more of a multi-purpose facility and all of those things. And so what we're trying to get with ecclesiastical or another insurer is that rather than insuring it for full replacement cost, the appraised value, we would insure it for what we would replace it for. And that might be saying, instead of saying it's a $7 million building, we would only build a $2 million building. And so let's insure it for two. Where the issues come are things like partial loss. So, you had part of the roof burned, and then you get into where is it a total write-off? There's a ton of around that, George, but that is some of the areas we're looking at is how do we cap? Because it's not fair to pay a premium on something you would never fully get back. So that's what we're trying to create. They don't have that mechanism today.
Okay, yeah, because I'm looking at this here and like I think our cost is more than double what that average invoice is.
And that's because the replacement cost on St. John's is quite high.
I have to tell you all, people, we got the most beautiful church there is in the diocese. What can I say?
And you're paying for it.
Yes, we are. Anyway, Alex, thank you very much.
You're welcome, George. I do use St. John's as a poster child in my own mind when I'm into this debate with the insurers. So, Margaret Wells Robertson is next. Margaret, you there? Looks like you're on mute. If you are, you're on mute. I can unmute. I can mute people, but I can't. Sorry?
Is that better?
That's better. I can mute people, but I can't unmute people. I'm sure there's some theological conclusion to that, but I can mute but not unmute.
Well, it's like turning water into wine, it's a talent.
Now that's the bishop's job. That's not mine. I just drink wine.
Not a question. I just wanted to say on behalf of the Wardens at Christ Church in Gananoque that we're very grateful to you for all of the efforts you put in the insurance over the last 2 years at least. We've heard about all of your negotiations, and I know from my years in property management, some of those negotiations can be pretty difficult. And we just wanted to let you know that we appreciate what you've done.
Well, thank you. It's been an interesting couple of years, and I understand it's tough. This is a tough space, and to me, it's one of the important things for our churches going forward from a broad perspective. So, yep, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
We're just happy we have enough money in the bank to cover the bill.
Yeah, well, and that's the next challenge is, how do we, if you look forward 5 years, and that's part of why we're trying to get at this now. So from the wilds of the north of North Hastings, Russ Grant.
The infamous, perhaps. Thanks, Alex. I have a question for Jane and a comment. So the question for Jane has to do with Safe Church and the validity of a current Nexus card. I understand in some areas that a Nexus card is taken or assumed as an alternative to either a police check or I think what was the other one you mentioned, the express check.
Right.
I didn't know what our position was on that.
I don't think we have a stated position on that, Russ, so I'm happy to look into that. I'll maybe ask my other EXO colleagues in the province what they're doing. But so far, it's just express check and police vulnerable checks that come from communities.
Okay. Yeah, certainly the Nexus cards probably come up less frequently, but they do go through a very thorough screening process.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, okay. And
Thanks.
my comment is just regarding insurance. I had occasion recently to learn that ecclesiastical, in addition to providing insurance for churches, also has a significant grant funding program. They are I guess the organization is a not-for-profit, so they in lieu of kind of banking their profit, they make it available in grants, capital grants, for sure. I know, which is something we're going to be looking at. So I didn't know if others in the call knew that, but that's there for what it's worth.
Russ? Laura, do we have questions that haven't been answered? Because some questions get answered in the chat. Are there any questions from the chat?
Yes, there are a couple regarding the Microsoft. So the first one is with Microsoft Office. You did touch on the license for that. Will there be a diocesan-wide shared license? And then also on the OneDrive, will there be space for each church to upload their own files and records?
Okay, so let me answer kind of both at once. Each church will get its own license. So we have an umbrella plan through Microsoft's not-for-profit side. And so each church will have their own license. And in fact, each clergy will have their own license for Office. And as part of that, you'll be able to like on OneDrive, there would be a folder set up that we would download from our Sage system, your monthly stuff. But the church would be more, obviously have the ability to set up other folders, and store other content on there, because that's what OneDrive is really targeted to be, as a central resource. And the other thing that we're exploring is something called SharePoint. For those that are on Synod Council, the meeting meeting materials are all stored on SharePoint. And so that within a church could prove to be a useful piece as well. And so each church would have access for its own SharePoint site. And we'd obviously have to explore how you might want to do that, what you might want to do with it, and how we can help you set that up. But you will have your own instance of all of the above. And it's very cost effective.
And then another question kind of tagging onto this is, would a website license be included?
So Microsoft does not, they provide tools to build, but they don't provide the hosting side. So whatever, as I mentioned, Mark can put a word in because we do have extended from that side, but Microsoft doesn't offer a website hosting service.
We actually have a special rate. Actually, anybody in the Anglican Church of Canada has a special rate with Tithely. And Tithely is the provider that we use for our diocesan site. There's about 4 or 5 churches in our diocese that use them as well. I can always provide more information.
And they also provide a whole lot of, if you wanted, a whole lot of framework for the design of it and the UI and all of that, right?
That's right, yeah.
Great.
And if churches already have Microsoft Office accounts, how would that turn over?
So in order to get the benefit of, obviously a church could continue with their own, but if you want to get the benefit of the lower rate, we would need to work a migration, but that's something that can be engineered individually with each church.
And then the final question regarding that new email, will email addresses change from the @ontario.anglican addresses?
No, we are going to port the ontario.anglican.ca domain. We'll go and move over. So for example, in my case, if we ported on Monday night, Monday afternoon, you would send an email to apearson@ontario.anglican.ca, and I would get it through Canadian Web Hosting. And on Tuesday, after we've done the change, you would send it to apearson@ontario.anglican.ca, and it would now flow through Microsoft. There's work that Nisht is leading that's going to move what they call the MX record, for those of you that are techie. The MX record, which in the big email system in the cloud, tells it where to send it. So it's kind of like a postal code. So and we will change that and it will all move. But nope, email will stay the same. Any last call for questions?
So Alex, Ted Davey in St. Mark's Berryfield.
Hey, Ted.
So I was really encouraged by your mention of alternatives for the insurance. It's a very depressing subject for most churches right now. And the subject has already been raised that when you have an old, beautiful church with a very high replacement value, with never any intent to replace the building as is because it's impractical and would be much less expensive, it seems unjust to be paying on that replacement value at this time. First of all, if it burned down tomorrow, we would not get a check for $3.2 million. We would only get money when we built a building. We might be able to go up to 3 million, but basically we'd only get what we spent. And so we are paying for insurance we're never going to get because we're not going to build the same design and the same size. And so I really plead you to pursue some sort of arrangement where we look at our replacement value for the new church, not to replace the old one, would really be a big help for those carrying big insurance prices.
You're preaching to the choir, Ted.
Well, I'm glad we're on side.
Unfortunately, the insurance company has a particular way of approaching it, and that we have basically right now a couple of options. One is demolition value, and that basically says that if the church burned down tonight, or even had a serious fire, not even like, more than just some burnt carpet and smoke, but if you had any more than about 50, 75,000 of damage, they would then come in, tear it down, and then grade and put topsoil down. That's what they would insure against. That doesn't allow for any kind of replacement or any kind of repair of any magnitude.
That
Second
may be
up,
quite advantageous.
But if that's the case, then you would realize that if you had any kind of, you're done.
Right. Well, it's not simple. It's got to be complex for sure. It's insurance, right?
So we're trying to get what we've tried to do is something called replacement cost.
Right.
And replacement cost says if your building's $3.5 million, we would not replace that building. We would put a slab on grade, 4,000 square foot multi-purpose that can be used for meetings and ministry during the week, set up on Sunday, and it would be say a $2 million building. And that's what you would insure against. Unfortunately, because that takes money away from the insurer, they make it very difficult to get there.
Yeah, they've been collecting this extra money for a long time.
They have, but there is no option.
Yeah. So a related question, the insurance coverage package was quite comprehensive, and most of us aren't brokers or even understanding most of the fine print. Has the Diocese ever thought about having a small workshop, a couple hours, where you could review the various parts of the insurance package that would make sense that we could explain to our parishioners so that they could all understand what we're paying, over $10,000 every year and what it is that we have to do? I would think that there are a lot of churches who need help understanding what we're being told we're paying for. And if you could help us at all, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
We've done a few sessions. We've done them as part of the Warden Treasurer call. We've also did one separate. I'm happy to we can certainly host a call like this for those that are interested. We can, and then record it, put it up on the website, let people ask questions, etc. I'm more than happy to bring our broker in to answer some of the more intricate questions. But if there's a general interest in doing that, happy to set that kind of session up.
How would you like us to express our interest?
if, I don't know, let me get how many just those with a raised hand, how many would be interested in an insurance session, just an educational one, not a bitch session, an educational one? How many be interested in that kind of, can you put your hand up, virtual hand up with your screen? It says, or raise your hand, just gives me a,
Where is it?
Mine doesn't say that.
up under, oh. Should be one that says raise your hand, an icon with that, so I can, so I'm up. I was about to say, if I can get more than 10 people, I'm up to 15 or 16. Yeah, okay. I think I hear you folks. So I will, just for clarity, I will work with our broker to set up an online call like this where we can do a little education and then open up for Q&A.
Thank you.
Thanks for the idea. Happy to do it.
That'd be awesome, Alex.
Alex, can I
Yes.
make a comment? And it's something that you told me some time ago, I think. I want to make sure I heard correctly. It's the whole replacement value thing. And if a church is worth, let's say, insured for, say, $5-6 million, but it would only be replaced by a building that might cost $1 million. If the parish shifted the insurance to the replacement value, and then if the whole building burned down, it would be fine because they would have the funds to replace it. But if they had a kitchen fire,
Partial
then
ones.
yes. So let's say the kitchen fire is $100,000. Well, the replacement value is 1/7 of the value, or 1/6 or 1/5 of the whole building. So that's what the insurance company would give them to replace the burnt out kitchen.
That's
They
right.
would pay for essentially 20% of it.
They
And the
would-
parish have to
You
come
get
up with
into
a
a,
balance.
and the way they consider it today is what they consider co-insurance. And it's like saying to them, I don't, because what they force us to do today is if you said I wanted a $2 million replacement, you have to go and get architect's drawings, engineered plans, and then go and get contractors to give you a quote for building that building. And most contractors aren't interested in doing quotes for something that's not going to bring them business. But and then they force you every 2 years to update that. It's an expensive, painful piece. And then you get into, now they end up saying, well, you're insured for 1/3 of what the building's replacement was. So a partial loss, you're co-insured. We would look at it and say, well, if it's insured for $1 million, I can take that $1 million and go. No, if it's insured for 1/3, you're going to only pay out 1/3. So there's a whole lot of hooks and weaves that are painful. If it was straightforward, we'd have fixed it. This is an evolutionary struggle. So anybody, I still see some hands up, but that may be from our voting. Anybody have any other question?
Alex, it's Brad O'Neill calling from St. Lawrence. How are you?
Right. I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I just want to let you know, pretty excited about all the changes that are coming to communication. So if you're looking for early adopters and groups that would like to pilot this early as parishes, sign up St. Lawrence. We'll definitely jump right in there.
And I appreciate that. And I can add that your incumbent is well ahead of you on that one, Brad. Has already put his hand up and said would be more than happy to have St. Lawrence take an early adopter and some of the things we're doing. So I will definitely keep that as Nisha and I work through that.
Michael and I have had many conversations already.
Excellent. Anybody else?
Alex,
Yes.
you tell George that St. Mary Magdalene Napanee is the prettiest church in the diocese.
Oh, geez. All
Maybe
right,
the
ladies
bishop,
and gentlemen,
bishop
let's
needs to
not
launch an
start.
official contest.
Let's not start that.
Okay. Mark, I'll invite you down. I'll pay your gas and I'll buy you a dinner.
Okay. There we go. We got a contest.
That's like, my baby's prettier than your baby. We'll watch that one go. On that happy note, let's turn back to the bishop and get his, whatever it is we have just done, let's get his blessing on all of us.
May Christ, the great Sun of righteousness, shine upon you, scatter the darkness from your path, and brighten your hearts with holiness. The blessing of God Almighty Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be with you this day and always. Thank you all. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, folks.
Okay, I saw my friend Wayne Barley on there. Just want to say hi to him. Hi, Wayne's George and Barb.